Hello, I'm Eric, and I have come up with a problem, so I'm turning to the internet community at large and Twitter and Facebook in particular to ask some questions, see if anybody wants to respond, has some answers. It begins with Nancy Pelosi. I have a lot of respect for the Speaker of the House, and I think she's been overall very good at her job. However, in February of 19, coming off of the 2018 midterms, at the State of the Union speech, Trump said that the Democrats could work with him or they could work against him. If Democrats chose to work against Trump, it would be war, and he would not cooperate because it would be war. He said there would be no response to subpoenas, no papers would be turned over, no witnesses would be allowed to testify if there were hearings on impeachment. The idea had been floated, though it hadn't gained a whole lot of strength at that point. I became ever more frustrated with Pelosi because my opinion about leaders is leaders lead. Pelosi liked to quote Lincoln, who said that with the people, much can be done. Without the people's consent, practically nothing can be done, and that is a paraphrase. However, I think of Washington and Franklin. In a biography on Washington, the author stated that George Washington and Ben Franklin were the two men their cohorts, the likes of Madison, Monroe, Jefferson, Adams, and the rest, looked to help solve difficulties when the representatives and gentlemen could not agree on where to go. And it was not just a matter of the Constitutional Convention, it was in many different areas that the two were looked up to by their cohorts and peers. In other words, Washington and Franklin were seen as leaders and were expected to lead, and they did. So, first question, do leaders lead or do they wait to have a majority? And I think Pelosi wanted a vast majority before they move. Given our political system and our ideological differences, looking for a majority may be a vain endeavor because it's hard to get a majority of people to agree on much of anything. We can't even agree on why we voted for Biden. Some voted for him because they wanted a return to institutionalism. Some, however, did not care for the incremental process or strategies that Obama had embraced and wanted something more full-throated, more in the image of FDR, and would have been much more happier with Sanders or Warren. And those people and others probably voted for Biden not because they thought Joe was the best choice. They felt that Trump was a far worse choice and far more dangerous, which he is. He's proving that every day and had been proving it every day since he took the oath of office. After all, he was still in control of his businesses, no matter what he said, when he took the oath of office. And that's illegal. And that brings me to my second point. During much of the first 2 years, even going into the third year of the Trump administration, lots of talking heads on cable news at any rate love to talk about guardrails and how the guardrails were holding or weren't holding, or what guardrails would keep Trump from acting out too much or doing too much damage to institutions. One of those guardrails is the law, and more specifically, when it comes to the president and the office of president, the Constitution. Well, guess what? We've got a situation where we have seditious actors who want to overthrow the government. At least that's what their actions indicate. They want Trump to stay in office. And after all, actions speak louder than whatever words Cruz and Hawley and the rest of them use. Over 100, or is it 140? That's what I heard today. Over 140 members of the House of Representatives, all Republicans, will contest or are willing to contest electoral votes in various states. And 15 senators are now willing to contest. You don't need that many, but that's how many we have at the moment. Shouldn't all those members, those national legislators, be disbarred, thrown out, kept from taking their seats? Article 14, Section 3 says anybody who acts in a seditious manner cannot take their seat in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. McConnell and Pelosi did not live up to the law. They did not abide by the Constitution. Now, I'm not talking about the blowback, the riots, the looting, the property damage that would come with following the law. I'm just talking about following the law. There'll come a time when, because we haven't followed the law will be far less meaningful than it could otherwise have been. It'll just be a paper tiger. And honestly, paper tigers aren't very useful. Just ask survivors of domestic violence. Hint, Joe Biden, before your first term is over, you might want to lead a crusade in making the Violence Against Women's Act actually something that sticks. A lot of people who work with survivors of sexual abuse say it's just a paper tiger. Restraining orders are just paper tigers. You got to go further. And that includes, if there's ever going to be a justification for stand your ground, it applies to the survivors of domestic violence. Everybody else does not need to have that law apply to them, but survivors of domestic violence do, very badly. I hope the current president-elect is paying attention. Anyway, those are my two questions. What good is the law when we don't use it? Can it really be a guardrail if we don't apply it? And how best to lead, from behind, as Pelosi wanted to when it came to impeachment, or get out in front, do the work that needs to be done. Truman did that too, not just Washington and Franklin. Truman got busy cobbling together a political coalition of people who could agree that the new world order after WW2 had to include America, and it had to include a coalition of European nations, or states, to use the political science term, and America, and it also included Canada. We overlook Canada and America a lot, but then they are our closest neighbors, and we tend to take our neighbors for granted, I think. Not just in political terms, but in our day-to-day lives. Eric out.